have.
I wanted to invite one of the members of the film crew that's here this morning, Selwyn George, to tell us just a few things about what they're up to. Selwyn.
We're shooting a documentary called In Search of the Valley. We swapped our homes in London for an apartment in Oakland. We're fueling up a vehicle and we're shooting hours of digital video and crisscrossing the Bay Area, trying to explore what makes Silicon Valley what it is, what makes it such a creative place.
And I know you're all really music people and educators, and you have, I know all of you are into lots of different things. And we're trying to do something here at KPFA. We're trying to change the world for the better. And having you here is helping with that.
Thanks for the time, Sandy.
Yeah, thanks, Selwyn.
Changing the world is what Silicon Valley did. It brought computers into our lives, and that's why we're here. We'd set out on a digital pilgrimage to discover the secrets of the Valley. But until I'd found myself live on the radio to half of California, which wasn't easy, believe me, it hadn't quite seemed real. This was our dream, to be on the road making a movie. And now we were actually here, taking the first step on our journey. I'm Selwyn, internet DJ and engineer. I'm on this trip to meet the pioneers who put computers into the hands of ordinary people like me. This is Fleeta, the American connection. A media educator is here to find out how the Valley's culture has led to such intense creativity. This is Steve, a digital evangelist whose life has been transformed by the work of Silicon Valley. As the driving force behind this film, Steve is on a mission to meet the minds that have changed his world.
Can I get a receipt, please?
Okay.
Thank you. Great. Take care. Thank you. Bye.
Over the next 30 days, we clock up 3,000 miles, traveling back and forth across the valley. Like many before us, our pilgrimage will begin with a visit to the birthplace of Silicon Valley. Our guide for the afternoon was original Macintosh team member, Andy Hertzfeld.
Hi, this is Steve. Hi, Steve. This is Selwyn. Yeah, sorry about the construction noise. They're going to knock off. Yeah, the dogs, are disconcerted by strangers.
Having escaped the cacophony of Andy's dogs and the demolition crew next door, we were on our way.
There are a lot of, have you seen a lot of visitors to the garage? Occasionally. Not frequently, but every once in a while you see a little group of tourists come by. Then I guess HP filmed an ad there. Yeah. And that was a big, they had a film crew about 5 times bigger than you guys.
And there it was, the place where it all began, the Hewlett and Packard garage.
This is pretty much the most famous garage in Silicon Valley, just a block from my house. And yeah, a lot of people give the credit for Silicon Valley to Dr. Terman, the Stanford engineering professor.
Professor Terman of electrical engineering encouraged 2 graduate students, Hewlett and Packard, to set up external to the university in business. And Stanford ever since has been very supportive of its students and faculty becoming involved in business. So the map of Silicon Valley grows out from the university.
And I guess the second most responsible person after him would probably be William Shockley, who went to the East Coast, helped invent the transistor, and then came back here in the 60s to start producing transistors, and then lured with him a lot of the brightest young, semiconductor people, and it blossomed from there.
Whilst Hewlett and Packard were happily Terman's protégés, the brilliant team that Shockley created soon had cause to rebel starting a trend that would become the true spirit of the valley.
Located on the San Francisco Peninsula at Mountain View, this is headquarters for Fairchild Semiconductor. From a small company that employed 8 people to one today that utilizes the talents and services of some 3,500 people.
Shockley was such a difficult person to work with, they started Fairchild. And then from Fairchild, not only Intel, but all of the semiconductor companies had roots in Fairchild.
You know, you started out with a couple of companies doing silicon, and then those companies, people struggled within the confines of the company. They left, they go start something else, and the process repeats.
Some of the key employees of one company would come up with a great idea, and they'd want to go off and start their own company. And then that one would have spin-offs and spin-offs and spin-offs.
It's like cell division, and before long you had a real critical mass.
So there were just such a proliferation in, I would say, largely in the 60s and 70s. A lot of companies that were going to basically be the seeds of this growing thing got started.
Over time, as we got sort of into the early 1980s, the infrastructure built up with the venture capital community and just the way all the companies work together, so it became very, very easy to start a new company.
By choosing to set up shop in Palo Alto, Shockley had put the silicon into Silicon Valley. Today, the area radiates outwards from Stanford University, north to the San Francisco Bay, south to San Jose, and west to the Santa Cruz Mountains. So how important is the valley's location to its success?
There's something about the exact physical location. We're right on the edge of the Pacific Ocean, so we're on the edge already, literally, and we are in one of the most beautiful parts of California. The peninsula, and down into Silicon Valley is surrounded by water on 3 sides, so you're almost on an island. And I grew up here, so I've been thinking about this all my life. And San Francisco is a very multicultural jumping off place.
I think there's something about California, and in particular the Bay Area, as being a source of the new, more of a source of the innovative. I think culturally things are more free here than they are in some other parts of the country, so it attracts creative people.
After a long drive high up into the Santa Cruz Mountains, we were greeted by Alan Lundell, a man who has spent much of his life documenting the valley.
Welcome to Boulder Creek. Hi, Steve.
A lot of boulders we went over.
Oh yeah, wait till you see the sunset up here. It's just, you can see why we're here.
You got a mercy break on there, Steve?
No, very good one.
Find out your, can you do hills?
Is that Johnson's farm?
That's the Johnson farm, that's it.
The view from Alan's veranda is stunning, and the valley's cultural landscape is just as rich.
I think that Silicon Valley is not a bubble unto itself, but exists within a matrix of many, what I consider highly evolutionary forces, all in a very small geographical area. And that, I think, is one of the keys to Silicon Valley. The 60s revolution in San Francisco, the Haight-Ashbury, the peace, love, sex, drugs, rock and roll, just erupted from there. All kinds of experiments and evolutionary paths involving those endeavors and those realms of human experience are still going to this day. And it's still a cauldron of evolutionary activity in that domain. It's just not as well perceived because it hasn't just started. It's still going on. It's like a strain, like a root that continues to grow. You may be familiar with Berkeley in the 60s. That was another primal force that still affects the world. And it has to do with conscious politics and thinking for yourself and questioning authority and the freedoms around associated with freedom of thought along those lines. Silicon Valley is incorporating all of these energies. There are people in the valley that are from these different worlds from the 60s, for example. They're not just ideas, they're actual people that were transformed or affected by the energies in these worlds and bring them into their work.
We'd arrived in Mountain View to meet computer pioneer Lee Felsenstein. At first, things didn't quite go to plan.
Yes, we have an appointment to look at the museum with Lee Felsenstein. Lee Felsenstein. Yes, hi. We have an appointment with Lee Felsenstein for 12:30. Excuse me? No. I think we're going to visible storage. So I think we can make our way around through the maps.
Okay, I'll go to Buddy.
Okay, thanks.
This is the SAGE system from IBM for the air defense command, in which the computer in that case came with a building that housed it and then housed its power and cooling system in an equally large space. So when you ordered a SAGE, you ordered a building. Wow. It was most expensive. In 1973, the first event of what I call the personal computer revolution occurred with the publication of an article, and it showed a picture of hands on a keyboard and a television screen with words, "Build your own TV typewriter." It didn't include the construction plans in detail in that article because it was much bigger than it could be published. It was an electronics hobbyist magazine. But they got a response, a paid response of 10,000 people sending in their $2 for the plans, which was, you know, a large response would be 20 people. So what I decided was that this article offered access to two mythical technologies, the digital technology that meant computers and the video technology, and it combined the two. It was irresistible. The message was, the subtextual message was, you, individual you, can control these technologies. You can use the digital technology to put your message on the TV screen. Everybody knew about computers, giant brains as they were sometimes called when we were young and computers were huge. And some people still haven't got out of that mindset. And video, well, we were raised in a video soup. Nobody had any input to it. Here are these mythic technologies. If you're good enough, you can actually get to control them.
So the personal computer started with people wanting to put their message on a screen, and now it's evolved to people sharing their message worldwide. But how did the hobbyists become innovators?
In the Homebrew Computer Club, right away, everybody was willing to tell what they knew. Either it was news articles, it was about new products that were coming out, or where computers were going to be used, or it was even articles about the computer industry saying that these little personal computers weren't going to go anywhere, these little hobby computers. But those were interesting. So we shared information, but we also shared techniques of, here's a little program that does a certain thing. Here's a little technique for a piece of hardware that will connect a teletype to a certain computer, or protect a voltage problem. This club was about showing people when you can design things, share it with others. And if you need help, you'll find people that'll help you.
Steve Wozniak was at the first meeting and came to every meeting until he was required to be back at Apple working on things, in part because at the meetings he would share all of his information, which was a very intelligent thing for him to do, because no one person can do it all.
And I took it very seriously, so I just published schematics and listings of everything I did. I handed out schematics of what became the early Apple computers, because the whole idea was if you help other people learn how you've done something, they're going to take it from there one step further. There wasn't big money. Nobody knew this was going to be an industry worth billions of dollars. It just was going to be some little small thing almost forgotten. So we could do the best things in the world for no money.
We're talking here about the building an industry, and it does go through stages where it starts with the early adopters, and we were the early adopters.
In the Homebrew Computer Club, there'd be a lot of talk about social revolution, and we were going to shake up how the world works, and people were going to have tools in their houses, computers in their homes that were more powerful than what they had access to at work, and they were going to own them instead of being a slave to what their employer wanted them to use, and that people were now going to be able to communicate and set up bulletin boards and things to distribute political and social event information. We were going to really free ourselves, and people were going to go a lot further in their organization abilities, in their thinking abilities. People were going to have computers teaching them mathematics, and their brains were going to be 10 times as great. It didn't all happen, but at least we were inspired that we were on top of one of the greatest changes ever in the history of mankind.
And these are people, nobody can figure out why they're interested in this technology. Doesn't make any sense to anybody outside. But the people inside love it, talk about it endlessly. That's all their life is about. They talk to each other about it, and then it moves to another level. It starts to become useful. And then the business folk come in.
The Valley had given birth to the personal computer industry, but the dreams of the Homebrew Computer Club and the early adopters could only be realized with venture capital. As companies were created and innovators became entrepreneurs, was money the new motivation?
Chuck and I didn't care a twit about money. I mean, as an engineer, and I think this is especially true of engineers, there's this sort of inherent need to have your stuff used and to build something and then have people actually use it.
As engineers, we have this kind of a sense of ethics that we've been trained to invent things better, to make things better than other people, to use our brain and come up with something that's valuable. So, so we're always trying to look for, what if this was done differently? What if these two things were combined into one? What if, different configurations of things? What if I did that instead and I got 3 times the speed for the same cost? So that's what our life's all about.
There's some very altruistic people working very hard to create the future around here. It's always been true. Certainly there's a broad scale of people's motivations, but people like to work. They like to work at interesting jobs, and they'll do that and take that over money very often.
We had sort of developed a technology within Xerox for 2 years. It was called Interpress. We tried to get the corporation to actually productize it and make products and go to market with it. And it just wasn't going to happen. And we recognized that. And so I think the drive for us to have our stuff actually used was more powerful than the security of the Xerox Corporation.
It's not just opportunity in the sense of money. It's opportunity to make a difference, to make something happen that you can point to and say, I helped make that happen.
I believe the personal computer industry was idealistic in nature, but I guess once you bring the money into it, the idealism and the money are a bit at odds. But somehow Silicon Valley's been able to synthesize the idealism and the financial aspects.
The motivation from money certainly is part of the romance of the Valley, and you look at all these people, from Steve Jobs and Bill Gates through Larry Page and Sergey Brin, who basically are now poster children. They're celebrities, because they were so successful. And I certainly know a lot of energy in the Valley comes from from entrepreneurs who want to make a fortune.
This desire to be the king of the hill, to take a brilliant idea and build a big empire out of it. I think the legends around here are companies like Hewlett-Packard or companies like Sun that did that.
But I also see a huge amount of the energy in the Valley, and maybe the most important part of it comes from people who are just passionate about what they do. And they were doing it before it became possible to make a fortune. And, it wasn't that, you know, Jobs and Wozniak, for example, were necessarily setting out to make their fortune. I mean, they were having a blast.
Although the Valley was ready to take the cash, the relationship between innovators and the money men sometimes turned sour. Mark Cantor, one of the founders of Macromedia, was unceremoniously forced out of his own company by the venture capitalists.
So there's like these layers, right? So there's like this, the culture of making money, the culture of being a nerd, the culture of helping to change society in the world. I mean, these are all completely different kinds of cultures. And what goes on is they all kind of intermix together. There are those people who wake up in the morning time and all they can think about is making money. And so it was very clear during the bubble that all the slime just jumped on the bandwagon, right? And poof, it all went away, and they're all selling real estate or, you know, whatever. So go away. And there are those of us who really believe in changing the world, and I'm one of those lucky people that actually has changed the world, and I'm not done yet.
10 lanes of traffic. This Bay Bridge is the most traversed bridge in the United States, and maybe the world. Did you hear that, Steve?
I heard ya.
In 1984, the Valley produced a computer that would change the world yet again. For millions of people like ourselves, the Apple Mac would open a world of digital creativity. Little did we know that 20 years on, one of us would be jamming with the Mac Daddy.
Early in January of 1978, in fact, it was on I think it was the day after the company got incorporated, I became Apple's 31st employee. I'd only been there about a year when I felt that the time was right to introduce something I'd been dreaming of for a while, and that was a computer that was graphics from the get-go.
Jeff rightfully came up with the concept of the Macintosh. He was collecting all this documentation that described his vision.
And I realized it was the interface that was keeping people from using the computer. So much later when I got to Apple, I had ideas for how computers should be used.
The main thing that the Macintosh team was trying to do was to make computers accessible to ordinary people. Not to technologists, not to engineers, but you know, people like our girlfriends, our brothers and sisters, our parents.
It wasn't long before Apple co-founder Steve Jobs took control of the project.
Jeff couldn't make it happen at Apple. Jobs was the one who was going to make it happen. He had the budget. And Jobs doesn't delegate unless he wants to.
He got interested in the Macintosh, and he finally began to understand what it was about. And he said to me one day, I'm going to take over hardware on Macintosh, and you can run software and documentation. And I said, okay, fine. Besides, the hardware was mostly working anyway, so. And then sometime later, he said, I'm going to take over software, and you can have documentation. At which point, you know, it was pretty much said, you know, forget it.
The Mac was one of the many attempts to commercialize the idea of a desktop metaphor and a mouse, cursors, word processing. And this is the original Mac. And this is the original Macintosh Division hat, which came from Daniel Kottke. And there were only about 50 of these made. These were worn by people who designed and built the Mac. It's a great thing that he donated. This chimney is here because Steve Jobs did not want a fan on this thing because it was, you know, ugly and noisy, and they tend to burn up.
One of the most gratifying things about the Macintosh is the area of its biggest success is with creative people like ourselves.
So you had this wild group of artists, really, running the place. You know, it was just great.
We were all about the same age, And it was, we all thought we were doing something important.
The root of evangelism, literally the way the Greek word has evolved becoming evangelism, is about bringing the good news. So obviously, if you're a Christian, you believe that you're bringing the good news of, you know, eternal life and salvation. And although not on that scale, if you were a Macintosh evangelist, you truly do believe that a Macintosh increases people's creativity and productivity. And for that reason, it is good news.
This is the original marketing literature, like 26 pages long, that was put out in December of '83, and there's Bill Gates. Because Microsoft was writing tons of the software for the Mac.
A new platform has to cross the chasm because you have to put in incredible engineering effort to design all the interfaces to support applications that don't exist yet. And then if you're doing something new and innovative, it takes time for the world to catch up with it.
Here was a computer that you could clearly see how it would go beyond the normal geeks and nerds who could use a computer. So you could understand that Macintosh was going to broaden the market for personal computers.
It was either going to be a hit or all of us would have had a lot of psychiatric counseling or something. We believed in what we were doing. We thought it was tremendous. We thought we basically had no competition. We were operating at a higher level.
And we thought we were going to change the world. And we did.
Here it is, 25 years after I proposed it, and I still have a Macintosh, and my kids still use Macintoshes. And the world still thinks that they're the easiest thing to use. So, not bad, I'd say.
The Valley has produced some of the world's biggest corporations and most powerful brands. But these companies would be nothing without their charismatic leaders. And there's one man whose name is known to everyone in the Valley.
When you talk about the character of Apple or the character of the Macintosh, much of that is the character of Steve Jobs.
And Steve is very clearly a genius. I mean, no question. I mean, you know, it drove the original Apple to its success. It was forced out of the company. The company fell on hard times. Meanwhile, Steve went off and created something else brilliant in Pixar, came back to Apple, you know, brought it out of the ashes. You know, you have pretty clear evidence that it wasn't just luck, right? This guy has something.
I don't know if he was the first technology evangelist, but he certainly made it a legitimate technique. So probably there was, you know, first there was Jesus and then there was Steve.
You could sign up to have lunch with Steve, and he would just, you know, you'd have lunch with him. And I signed up for one of these and no one else showed up except for me and Steve. And this man was so charismatic that I'd never forget it. I could not eat my food. He was sitting across from me just like you are now, and the guy is just like so charismatic. He's like glowing and on fire, and I was just like watching. I mean, by the time the lunch was over, I'd just been so dazzled, and I looked down and I hadn't touched my food. And so that was an experience of the charisma of Steve Jobs. I personally experienced this. And there's 180 to that, which is the dark side.
He does, in fact, you know, cut a pretty broad swath through friends and enemies alike. You know, I mean, he basically believes what he believes, and you know, and don't get in his way.
There was a made-for-television documentary about the Battle of Jobs and Gates. I don't know if you ever saw it. And there was a key point in that. It was like Jobs was on the phone bitching at his wife about the kid. They had some kid. And Wozniak runs up to Jobs and says, dude, I just found that they fucked Dan Kotke and he didn't get any stock. You know? And Jobs goes, who cares about him?
He and I were housemates in 1978. The whole first year of Apple, we were housemates in Cupertino, but he was rarely ever there. He was living at his girlfriend's house. You know, and then he became very successful and very wealthy and powerful very quickly, and not like I expected any special treatment. The problem was really more that it was extremely hard for me to deal with not getting a stock option, even though I was the first employee. That was just a whole difficult thing to go through.
You know, I think that's maybe a characteristic of you know, a lot of great innovators. You know, they're not necessarily easy to be friends with.
When he was at Next, I was looking for a job because I just lost my job at Activision and I was pregnant. I was way pregnant. And my mother had bought me this unfortunate orange maternity outfit with flowers on it that I was wearing. So I showed up at Next for the interview with Steve, and I was sitting in the room waiting, and he came in the door and he said, "Wow, you look like a sofa." And I said, "Wow, you're just as sensitive as they say you are." And he walked out of the room. That was the end of the interview. So that's my Steve Jobs story.
I was actually at Apple. It was the big debut, and I was going to go in and speak to him. But just before I walked into the door to meet Steve Jobs, my friend Dan Kotke stopped me. Right? He says, "Al," he said, "you don't want to meet Steve right now." I said, "Dan, this is my chance to meet Steve. You know, this is like, who knows when the next time is going to." He says, "Meeting Steve's really important on the first impression, and you know, he's not in a good mood right now, and anybody, you know, he talks to is not going to fare well, I'm afraid." So I was looking at Steve, and he's right there in the next room, is just waiting to be talked to, and there's my friend Dan telling me this, his best friend, his friend who traveled to India with him on a spiritual search. And so I just took a breath and, "Okay, Dan, okay, I won't meet him." And I haven't had another opportunity to meet him since. That was it. That was it. That was like 20 years ago.
The general feeling in the Valley is one of mixed admiration and frustration, because he is so clearly a genius, and yet he's also very difficult to work with. And so I think he's going to continue to make the industry more interesting for a long time to come.
The extraordinary success of Steve Jobs and the growth of companies like Apple was big news back in the 80s, but this paled into insignificance with the events of the mid-90s. Silicon Valley was to become the center of the dot-com boom, a crazy time when money made anything seem possible.
Are you John?
No.
You're not John?
John Warnock?
Yeah.
He's next door.
Sorry.
All right.
And just split it. Roll in half.
You could see it happening since 1994. The internet came along, and there were so many opportunities. I mean, you sort of had a clean slate with what you could invent and how you could go to market. And everybody picked their either favorite marketing idea or their favorite technical idea or their favorite communication idea. And everybody, including the venture capitalists, sort of jumped on the bandwagon.
We started to see a lot of hype, a lot of justified hype, but people got distracted by the idea that you could make a lot of money fast on the net. So we were kind of distracted from what the internet should be about.
People got a great deal of money that shouldn't have gotten any money because they really didn't have proven or tested ideas.
Things got surreal pretty quickly. You know, by 96 and 97, every good press release about a company going online or about a new service being offered started to become more and more Dali-esque.
There are companies that should have never have been born. I mean, never. I mean, in a million years. I mean, I sat in a lot of VC deals, and I'm just like, what are they thinking? You know, I just wanted to say, don't do it. Don't invest in this company.
The venture capitalists, I think, were attracted to the idea that was the big idea, the wackiest idea, you know, the one that either it was going to change the world or it was going to fall flat on its face.
I would call the venture capital sheep at that point. They were all following in a flock.
Those pigs could have walked into a VC office in Sand Hill Road, and by showing up, they'd be valued at $10 million.
They give me every pose I want.
Are they giving me the poses? You might look good to eat, or source of things that are good to eat. I think for the most part, everyone lost at that game, because it led to the devastation of the venture capital sector and the trust in it, and the processes that made it successful were gone. You hear venture capital and investment community today saying, we need to see where your revenues might come from. You're talking to a kindergarten mentality compared to the genius and the tenacity of those original investors.
I have to say that it kind of turned out a lot differently than I thought. I figured sanity would arise, quality products would matter. I never believed that companies would go public with one feature. I mean, forget the fact that they even had a product. These people barely had a feature, and they're going public, and the meteoric skyrocketing stock prices. I mean, I had employees in my company that were making more money just hustling day trading, right?
In our dorm rooms, instead of looking up porn, we were looking up stock books.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's strange, yeah.
I mean, it was very
Why weren't you looking at porn? What's wrong with you?
No, really.
Now, some of the people I know from the Valley effectively made their fortunes, taking the money from some guy in, Nebraska, who thinks he's going to get rich by investing in, again, in some startup. And yeah, maybe he's a stupid investor, but it's a game in which some people always win. The house, Wall Street always wins. The insiders always win. And I don't like those kind of games.
I have an idea, and with some money, I can turn it into a concept. And then maybe we can get a little bit more money and it'll become a plan, but it didn't seem like there was a lot of product.
You also have companies where entrepreneurs have taken enormous risks, worked, incredibly hard with vision and persistence, and have created enormous value, and they absolutely deserve, their success. And and the capital is part of what made that happen.
The temperature was highest in the middle of the .com. You had a lot of .com supporting parties, and you had a lot of people with a lot of money. I mean, and that made a big difference. People eating out at sushi 5 times a week and spending all their money on creating amazing parties because the money was there and it wasn't going to end.
The other writing on the wall was that you'd go to the parties and the company would be spending vast sums of money, but would never bother to barely even tell you what the name of the company was or even the product. It was absurd. And at the parties, people were meeting each other to go get new jobs. And so it was like what was the point of the company throwing the party when they would lose all their employees? So it was, quite absurd.
You didn't get to know me last time.
No.
Look at Bulba.
That's a growl of love, isn't it?
Yeah. It was crazy because people were getting offered a personal chef. They were getting offered a BMW, top of the line BMW, Mercedes, just to sign the contract, just as a signing bonus. 2 companies in San Francisco were offering companionship for, these lonely, nerdy engineers who couldn't get a date no matter how much money they got, right? And they wouldn't know how to pay for a hooker. And so it's just like they offered them these women who would come and go and it brought them happiness, and it was better than a BMW.
I got a call from the CEO of the company telling me that I have a $500 budget in 3 days to figure out a way to water balloon the company across the street. And it went off better than could be expected. I mean, we bombed the hell out of them, ruined a buffet, spread they had set out, and it was very funny to us. But then it turned out that they had been laying off people that day, and most of the people that we had soaked had just lost their jobs. And I guess in retrospect it made sense because a lot of them had kind of a fuck all attitude, like, come and get me, I don't got nothing to lose. It was kind of unreal.
Although billions of dollars poured into the Valley in the mid-90s, the millennium brought with it the inevitable. The dot-com bubble finally burst.
I don't think anybody anticipated the NASDAQ, getting cut in value by 70% or whatever it was.
A lot of people lost really good jobs and found it pretty hard to get decent jobs again. It's taken some people some years, and a lot of people haven't been able to.
I think I'm really good at what I do, and I have a lot of talents. I do hardware and I do software, and I've worked in a lot of different types of engineering fields, and I just never would have believed that I would go 2 years without finding work.
the anxiety and the depression that people are in as a result of basically their dream going away. Their dream was, I can go from job to job and get more and more interesting jobs, get a good enough pay that I can survive, and maybe I can start my own company sometime. And that went away.
So now we're going through one of the little industrial parks. This one is fairly old given the height of the trees. See the buildings with these strange sort of Greek names, blue coat systems. What does that do? Who knows? Many of these are vacant now because of the state of the economy. There's a very familiar for lease sign. Another sign is space available. It's one of the fastest growing companies.
The upside of this was that a lot of new technology got developed and got deployed. Whether you call it greed or not, all this money had some really good secondary effects. And I'd prefer the pursuit of money accelerating the development of technology rather than wartime, so that's pretty good.
You look at, for example, all the fiber that got built out. Well, the companies that built it out aren't going to benefit from that, but now that we have it, society is going to benefit from it.
A lot of people lost a lot of money, and that was really bad, but that meant that the people who were trained here, who had really good jobs here, got dispersed throughout the world, bringing with them knowledge of this democratizing technology.
I believe that the dot-com revolution has barely begun, and there's so much more that's going to happen. You know, we're really starting to move to the world where the internet is the platform. And you know, the dot-com, for all that it crashed, was actually understating the potential of this next revolution.
Now we're going to start doing stupid stuff again, hopefully, and start it all over again. You got to forget the pain to get moving forward.
With its history of technology and innovation, the Valley is best known for its day job, but the Bay Area is also home to a vibrant creative community. And when night falls, the geeks turn code into art.
The big FKO, meaning fucko, meaning fuck shit up, meaning don't take yourself too seriously, meaning spray large amounts of fire over things and stuff. One of the things about the Bay Area in particular that is really neat is that people are inspired to be artists who never thought they could be. New York is very focused around gallery culture and shows and museums and also around art as economics. Out here, people will do things for themselves just because they have a cool idea and they want to see it happen without anybody judging of whether that's art or not. There we go. This is where we solder things. A lot of the people in this space, in this warehouse, are software developers in one sort or another. Because of the sort of involved nature of programming, it becomes more necessary to have some sort of artistic release or some sort of other release. And this is where all of the geeks have gotten together and going, my God, something else, please.
The stuff I do is technology based. I have a degree in mechanical engineering. I've worked as a geek all my life. So sort of the art thing is kind of a side thing. Engineering mindset tends to be focused on the processes behind how everything works. And an artistic one is actually like how everything actually looks and the experience of it. I can't judge, you know, this is better than the other, blah, blah, blah. I'm just like, they're two different ways of looking at the world. Check, 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 check. That's not satisfactory. Check, check, check.
This was the very first project that I worked on. I learned how to solder to make one of these. It's a friend's idea. It's a Radio Shack megaphone with a couple of jacks added so that you can talk into the microphone, the sound comes out, you can put it through effects pedals, and then sound goes back into the megaphone. So it's essentially, it's a portable amplifier you can use to make almost any obnoxious noise you can come up with. This is what's known as an amplifier.
You're Fleeta?
Yes.
I'm Brenda.
Brenda, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
This is Steve.
Hi. That relationship between technology and sensibility for art is really one of the core elements of what makes this an interesting place to be. That even those people who are not who wouldn't define themselves as artists see artists as their users or as their customers. You know, so there is this overriding awareness that we're all engaged in a cultural enterprise, and that immediately brings you to the arts and to creative people. Just the whole printer revolution and the ability to make things, and then you get into the world of video and web, and it's always been about empowering people in different ways.
The fusion of art and technology is nowhere better exemplified than at Burning Man.
San Francisco has a lot of real creative artists, and so the art community got attracted to Burning Man, and then because of the technology, Burning Man is now far, far and away the biggest concentration of technical art in the world. I had known about it since 1990 and thought it was interesting, but I don't like the desert. I didn't want to go to the desert. I like the forest. But a friend finally dragged me to Burning Man, and the moment I got there, it just clicked for me, and I realized it's not about the desert at all. It's about art. I've used Burning Man as the excuse every year for like doing these great projects, and it's been very fulfilling.
Burning Man is a fabulous and fabulously dusty R&D lab for wild-eyed art nerds who come to try out all the crazy stuff that nobody else anywhere on the planet will let them try because it's phenomenally dangerous, may not work, or both.
Burning Man is a playground for engineers. There's a concentration of a lot of creative people here that don't really have that kind of outlet and who've been inspired by the experience of Burning Man. You go to Burning Man and see 5,000 new ideas that are mostly done by people like you. And you come out of that and you usually have a good idea.
People go to Burning Man and get really excited about what they see, and suddenly their vision of what's possible really changes. And they can conceive of making something that's 20 foot tall and spins around and just amazes people. And a lot of people have the idea of they saw something which amazed them and changed their outlook, and they want to do that for something else. And I think that's really awesome.
Unfortunately for us, we never made it to Burning Man. With only a month to spend in the valley in a wheelchair that doesn't do desert, it just wasn't going to happen. Luckily, Alan's son threw us a post-burn party. This is our chance to get a private viewing of something few people have seen before. Virtual Burning Man.
We had one inventor who came in a helicopter one year, lands at Burning Man, and he disappears. He's talking to all these people. He goes away. He has a meeting the next day at his Silicon Valley offices, and his staff comes to our trailers, knocking on the door. He's looking for him. They can't find him. It's like 7 in the morning. He's gone, and I have no idea where he is. He's having fun somewhere. And so the helicopter's just waiting. It's important business must wait for Burning Man.
If you're coding 12 hours a day, you can't go on a vacation on a cruise ship. You have to go to something that is mentally incredibly stimulating, where you're going to stay up for 5 days in a row and still get relaxed. So you need something as nutty as Burning Man in order to blow out your system.
Thanks every day. Got nice chocolate from her. See, someone, if you were driving, would have been there for 10 minutes.
Hey, where are we going now?
Well, we're going to Napa Valley.
And what's that going to do in Silicon Valley?
Absolutely nothing. Fuck.
And why are we going there?
So we want to drink some wine.
Like the wines produced in California, Silicon Valley has had good years and bad years. But after the recent dot-com crash, does it have a future?
You can't kill it. It's here, it's going to be around, and people will find a way to make it work.
A lot of people who've made a lot of money who happen to live there and are going to start new things.
It is constantly bubbling, and at some points it erupts, and at other points it's merely stewing, but it's always there.
I would look at the Silicon Valley not as a geography, but sort of a state of mind. And the state of mind certainly can create anywhere.
Everywhere I went in Europe, I met someone who used to work out here, right?
If you go to India, if you go to South Africa or Russia or whatever, Silicon Valley's everywhere now. There's Silicon Valleys all over the place. And the net allows you to funnel work and channel work and money and dollars.
So that's kind of scattered itself to the wind. So right now it's more like a global Silicon Valley, right?
At Buck's Restaurant, a renowned hangout for entrepreneurs and venture capitalists, we ended our journey as so many film crews have done before us.
Hey, and this is then also the table where Netscape was basically founded. And
the Valley had left its mark, and now it was our turn.
So up here, it says a number of times a dog ate my homework, but it would be too grandiose to say it's the TV crews. But we're putting your mark up here. I can reach up here. There you go, 185 or something.
In Search of the Valley, we set out to discover the reason why so much innovation and creativity had come from one place. Living in England, it's hard not to think that the weather and environment must play some part in the Valley's success. Or perhaps its location, so close to San Francisco, a city rich in counterculture. Maybe it's the Valley's long history of engineering or the close relationship between business and academia. It could be all or any of these. But after a month in the Valley, we felt there was something else. A lot of the people we talked to weren't in fact born in the Valley, but like ourselves had ventured here for a reason. The Valley has an infectious culture that says it's okay to follow your dreams. In fact, here it's expected, and that's what makes it so special.
It's really an essential ingredient to have sort of iconoclasts as part of the Valley, where you say, gee, somebody has said this can't be done, I think it can be done, it's okay to go ahead and try to do it.
If the Valley's going global, maybe we can take some of it home. Or perhaps by following our dream and making this movie, we'd already brought some of it with us.
Where we started Macro Mine, 1984. Well, hey, we were kind of naive now, and you know that's what I'm for. Well, the venture capitalists came into my life and took my company from me. But I didn't care about them, 'cause I knew more than them. Yes, but they had all the money, and they made me suck their dicks. But I told them, sorry, you don't got no lubrication, and I'm doing the tricks. Well, you know, they get you in the shower, and then they drop that bar of soap. Yeah, they want you to bend over and take it up your poke. Yeah, we call it that Silicon Valley dance now. And all sorts of film companies come out and tell you a whole bunch of stories about it. Well, we got the global Silicon Valley now. We don't need them anymore. Yeah, we use our blog and